This is the DTV Digest, the podcast that brings you news and reviews of films which didn't make it to the cinema. And now, here's your host, Mike Parkin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DTV Digest. I'm your host, Mike Parkin, and joining me tonight, as usual, are Richard Hawes.
Hello, everyone.
And Stephen Lockeridge.
Hello.
This week, we've got four main reviews to look at. We've got a film called ROADKILL, followed by Wrath of Souls. These two are both from Australia. Then we have Anson Mount in MK Ultra, and then Stephen Lang in Old Man. Our short shot is the Vietnamese film Oath of Honor, and our DTV throwback is Tremors 2 Aftershocks. So without further ado, let's crack on. Our first film then is ROADKILL. A petty thief operating along the highways of rural Australia gets caught in the crossfires of an ongoing police investigation after he mugs a serial killer. This is a low-budget film. Probably, you know, it's weird. We don't seem to come across many low-budget Australian films. Not as low as this, at least. It's an interesting film. It's weird that it's trying to sort of make this particular guy a sort of sympathetic hero. It's almost like they're just saying, well, he's just a typical Australian, really. Some of the dialogue choices and some of the delivery, I don't know about you guys, it reminded me a lot of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Yeah.
Especially the you know, the sheriff guy. There's a bit where he's the lieutenant's sort of going, go home, lieutenant. You know, go see your family and all this sort of stuff. You know, you're all stressed out, and he's sort of like going, when will this madness end? It's just perfectly Garth Marenghi stuff. Anyway, more from me in a minute. Steve, how did you get on with ROADKILL?
It's okay. I mean, you could tell it was very, very low budget. And like you said, some of the dialogue was pretty poor. But it was an interesting concept, to be fair. It's not something I've seen before. Kind of reminded me of The Hitcher.
Yep.
The Rutger Hauer one, you know, but less insanity and like that. But it's like you said, some of the acting choices were a bit out there, and it did let it down a bit. But all in all, not too bad. I've seen a lot better. I've seen a lot worse, but I think you just need a bit more of a rounded, better performances and a bit more of a budget, really, to get the best out of the script, really.
Yeah. Rich, how did you get on with ROADKILL?
I thought I liked it. I thought it had a pretty intense opening, and the film is shot really nicely. I think it's as you guys have kind of pointed out, I think it's some of the performances are what really sort of drag it down and sort of highlight the sort of the limitations. I think the budget limitations are most apparent in the casting, because the performances don't seem to have the experience to sort of make the characters as, you know, convincing as they would need to be, especially the villain. I've got to be honest, I really wasn't keen on the serial killer guy. But it's very the locations and stuff, because it's all desolate landscape, you know, the Australian desert highways and stuff, really, you know, eye-catching. We've seen it used, you know, we've seen similar sort of stories both in Australia and in America where you can do that sort of thing. You know, whether it's Hitcher or what was that Stacey Keach movie with Jamie Lee Curtis? That was shot in Australia, wasn't it?
Road Games?
Road Games, yeah, stuff like that. Duel, another one, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Tailgate.
Tailgate, yeah. well, Tailgate's interesting because it does that sort of story, but in like a very
Like
a
a
very
microcosm,
urban
innit? Yeah.
sort of setting and stuff. Is what was it? Was that Belgium or
Denmark, wasn't it? I think.
Denmark? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so there's a similar kind of sort of stuff at play. You know, stuff we've seen before. The lead character is the director and writer himself, Alexander Whitrow. I got a little bit of a Josh Hartnett sort of vibe off him, and I do quite like everyone in it. I think it's just certain characters, like the young sort of detective in the suit and stuff. They just a little bit rough around the edges, but I quite like the older guy. It was really, say, after the sort of quite intense opening, they then do that scene where they go and talk to the priest, and the priest says, "Oh, the killer, you know, I've spoken to the killer," sort of thing. And it's a really you know, the performance of the priest and stuff is like, oh, that's, you know, it's not great.
But what I like about that scene though, it is straight out of The Simpsons. You could swap that cop out. You could swap that cop out for Chief Wiggum. The way he treats the priest. It's like, oh, really, you know, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You say,
Small horseman, Elo.
It's just incredibly condescending. So you know.
Yeah. What was it? But I tell you the one thing I mean, some of the actions shot really nicely as well. So I would say the camera work and stuff's good. I will say I really like the music. It gets a bit repetitive, but it's very propulsive.
At times,
I did. It sort of kept things going really nicely. So I'm not sure who the score was by, but I was trying to look in the credits when I saw it. But yeah, that was probably my favorite thing about the film. The way it looked and the way it sounded were the 2 key assets. I definitely think it's worth a look.
Yeah. I got two favorite moments in this. I did like the double bluff at the end where they sort of make you think one thing's happening, but it's actually something else. And it's a bit like the ending of Silence of the Lambs when they're raiding the house. You know, the way you've got the two things edited together, so it looks like it's this one thing. That was pretty well done. The other scene is something which I'd label as only in Australia, and that is when our main character, I can't remember his name, he stood by his car getting pissed, and he's still got his gun in his hand, and this other guy drives up and goes, you know, how you doing, mate? And all this. He goes, oh, what's the gun for, mate? Hunting. What, ruse? Yeah. Goes, oh, shoot one for me then. And just drives off. You know, you would never ever, that scene would never ever play out like that in any other country, especially America. You know, somebody would be dead you know, at that particular moment. But that was just like, it just nailed the sort of laissez-faire attitude of Australia. You know, so got a gun, eh? Good on you, mate. It's absolutely brilliant.
And it's very Australian because it's got a ute in it.
It has got a ute. Got to have a ute. This, you know, it passed the time quite nicely. I really, you know, every now and again, like I said, you know, the sort of main detective, the older detective, some of his line delivery just reminded me of Garth Marenghi for some reason. Yeah, Matthew Berry, is it? Matt Berry. Matt Berry. Yeah, you're running with him. But yeah, it was pretty well done, I think, overall. So how are you going to?
I'm liking it. So I'd say I think you could see a similar sort of. I would equate it to some of the low budget British stuff we've seen, maybe like Nathan Shepker's films and stuff like that. I would sort of put as a similar sort. I could see like a British version of this quite easily, obviously in a sort of different kind of setting. But I would, you know, it's not a million miles away. Although I think it's because of the locations and that, I think it looks a lot better than anything than a lot of stuff that would have been shot in the UK.
They do a pretty decent.
So I think that sort of.
Yeah, they do a pretty decent stab at a 7 ending as well, don't they? Which I thought was pretty well done. Yeah, no, good stuff. How are you going to score it, Steve?
I'll give it a 6.
Yeah, and Rich?
I'm going to give it a 7.
I'm going to join Steve on a 6. 2 6s and a 7. This is pretty solid. Go check it out. Our next film is Wrath of Souls. A young man called Kieran becomes plagued by mysterious tragedies around him. While these events perplex the police and investigators, Kieran's behavior becomes increasingly erratic with each tragedy. He experiences visions of events he is unable to understand or explain. This is one of those horror films which basically throws everything it can at the screen and hopes something can stick. It is pretty erratic at times. It does eventually settle down into a story quite late in, but mostly we're following this guy, Kieran, who is taking a job at the local crematorium. Seems to get on well with the staff and that, but you know, we know that he's got anger issues, for example, and weird shit starts happening at the crematorium while he's there. Eventually it kind of makes sense, but for a long period I think we're sort of like, well, is this all happening for shits and giggles, or is there actually a purpose to it? What did you make of it, Steve?
Yeah, you're right with that. It was just a bit, not all over the place, but there's like, you've got 5 minutes in the present, then you've got a flashback, which you don't know it's a flashback, to be fair. You know, you're kind of working it out as you're going. You're like, is this happening now? Is this in the past? And it's just all over the place. And it's, like you say, it's not scary at all.
I'll give an example. I'll give an example. You know, I'm saying this is throwing everything at you to see if something sticks. So something happens in the furnace room. You know, so I think somebody gets caught on fire or something in the furnace room, and they're all burning. And then, like in another part of the building, far away, someone's like washing their hands or something, and all of a sudden, all this blood starts gurgling up from in the sink. When nobody's there, you know, whoever's washing their hands already left, but the camera decides to linger, and it's like, well, make up your mind. What is it? You know, are you, you know, are you burning people alive? Are you doing this? You know, what else are you doing? It just, yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. Also, you've got like the you got a possession angle as well after that bit. Which
exactly. It's all it's almost like they're going through a checklist, isn't it? It's like, that didn't work. You know, it's almost like Beetlejuice, almost. It's like, well, let's try and scare them with this first. And no, okay, fine. Let's move on to the bloody possession bit. You know.
And it just, I mean, it seemed like every single performance was going for an Aussie cliche, you know. It was just the effects weren't particularly good neither. Performance, I mean, the bit where he is possessed and decides to run like through the streets with just his arms on, I was just like, because he just looked like he was freezing and his feet were cold. You know, and they could have been, but if a spirit's possessed you, I think that'll be the last thing on your mind. And it just doesn't give that authenticity in any way, shape or form. And like you said, it throws everything at the kitchen sink, and it doesn't really make sense till the last 5 minutes. And to be fair, the baddies are actually quite fucking nasty, really. Yeah. Especially, you know, what they're doing at one point. And then, but the ending as well, like the very last scene. Again, that made no sense to me. Because how is it? Yeah. I won't go into any spoilers, but how? Yeah,
totally agree. Rich, Wrath of Souls, how did you get on?
I think I liked it more than you guys. It's quite interesting. The original title of the film is I, Wrathful Soul, or I think as it came up on the screen, I, A Wrathful Soul. I is, which is pronounced Aiyyai. I was had to do some research because they don't really clarify it in the movie, as far as I remember. It's from ancient Indian literature, meaning princess, a woman from a homeless clan of gypsies who have remained destitute, streetmongers for generations. Blah blah blah. When a woman of these traits suffers an extremely torturous death, her restless soul re-emerges and returns as the most powerful spirit to destroy her wrongdoers. That's sort of the idea behind it, but they don't sort of delve into that too much until sort of later in the movie. But basically you start out with some in media res, which then turns out to be the first act of the movie, which is the haunted crematorium place part, and then, like you say, it becomes a possession story. I was pretty interested in it. The film, it's an Australian film, but the filmmakers are Indian Australians, and the lead character is Indian, which I thought gave a really interesting angle to it. And I would say I wasn't so sure on his performance in the first part, but I thought he was really good in the possession section, especially when he's sort of contorting himself, and there's what I thought it was a really good alleyway sort of beatdown kind of sequence, where he's like being quite feral and stuff with some of the sort of ne'er-do-wells in the film. I really like that. It was probably my favorite scene. The rest of it, yes, it is very standard. It's quite interesting to sort of have the say the Australian setting and that again. So completely coincidental that we got these two Australian films, but it's I thought that the guy who was like the guy who takes on Kieran, and initially he's being quite friendly, but sort of also a bit a bit offish, and then he like really reveals his sort of true colours as the story unfolds. And that I thought he was pretty good, because there's him and a few of the other characters are really nasty, and I thought they were very convincing, in a way that maybe the characters in Roadkill weren't. So yeah, I think there's enough in here. I think if you like, Wrath of Souls, I think, is a bit misrepresentative, because I think the original title makes more sense. We're not talking about loads of haunting, exactly. Sort of thing here. This is very much a singular sort of thing that's happening.
Now, did you realise when you were watching this that the flashbacks you were watching were actually flashbacks?
Well, I did after, I think I did pick up on it. Maybe not. I can't remember whether I did sort of the first time or whatever, but I started to be. But I quite like it when they're not signposted. It was quite well done. I thought it was just like, okay, it's one of those ones where you got to try and keep up, rather than having title cards and stuff coming up like This is one of the things recently where it's every 5 seconds. It's 8 years ago or whatever it is and stuff.
That would annoy me. Yeah, here's me complaining about the fact that they went through this sort of checklist of like different things, and the flashback sequence, and just sitting here pondering it now, I'm thinking, well, maybe that's the point. Maybe that is this vengeful spirit sort of getting to grips with what it needs to do. And becoming stronger, using him as a conduit, and actually becoming stronger and stronger to the point where you can actually possess him and take vengeance. But and as you say, the flashbacks, you're not supposed to know until what the order of what things happened in, when he meets the girl and things like that. So I'm while I'm watching it, it was frustrating. Sitting here now talking about it, I'm giving it a bit more slack, I think.
The other element is how much of it. They sort of sell it as a sort of a psychological horror, and I suppose that some of it is open to interpret. But I didn't really take any of it really as psychological. I took it quite literal.
Yeah, it seems very literal.
Yeah, I don't think the psychological angle maybe works as well as the potential possibly was thinking it was, but. I think it's very standard stuff. We've Conjuring and all that sort of thing. We've seen a lot of this sort of stuff recently, but it's just got that, it's got that Indian element and the Australian element, and some of the execution is a bit more maybe sort of not action, but sort of more leaning into other genres rather than just purely sort of sticking just to horror. So I think some of the stunt work and stuff in the sort of limited moments that those happen are a bit, they sort of lean more into something like, this is a very extreme example. This is not like this film at all, but Malignant. There's a little bit of that in there and stuff, which I quite appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Steve, how are you going to score it?
I'll give it a 5.
All right, I'm going one higher with a 6. So it's slowly growing on me, this one. Just thinking about it. And Rich?
No, I'm going to go another 7 on this one. I really quite liked it. So I liked all the payoff at the end and everything. I thought it was a good experience watching it.
Okay then. So nice broad spectrum there. A 5, a 6, and a 7 for Wrath of Souls. Go check it out. Our next review is MK Ultra. Set during the 1960s, Ford Strauss is a brilliant psychiatrist whose moral and scientific boundaries are pushed to the limit when he is recruited by the CIA to conduct illicit experiments with LSD. I don't think I've seen a more pointless film this year. I did not get on with this at all. It was dull. There was just nothing there. He got Anson Mount sort of pumping these guys with LSD or whatever, and just recording the results and seeing what happens. And at a certain point, getting a bit sort of antsy in his fancy about it all. Meanwhile, sort of the CIA guys are taking all the research and scurrying away with it. I don't know. It's just very, very dull. Steve, change my mind on this.
No, I'm not going to, because it was the tones was all over the place. I mean, I don't know. It's like going for comedy 1 minute and then dark and disturbing the next minute. And pointless is the word, because it just does these, pumps people full of LSD, and that's it. There's no, and then you've got a little bit of thing at the end, and that's it. It just seemed tacked on. Now the thing is, I've heard quite a bit about this before.
Yeah.
On podcasts and stuff, and it's an intriguing story. What actually went on, and I don't know. They've just like missed the point. The way I see it, they've not. It's frustrating because when I read about it, I thought, oh, actually, yeah, I'm up for this one. And Anson Mount's just wasted, really. I like him, he's great in Star Trek and what's the one with Abby Cornish, where's the hitman? I can't remember what it's called now, but he was great in that. And this, I don't know. And Jason Patrick as well. They pulled him out of nowhere. And
I didn't recognise him, I must admit.
He don't do anything.
Yeah.
Really doesn't. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking.
It's like what was that series on Netflix? Not Criminal Minds, the other Minds. About setting up the behavior. Mindhunter, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that, but like it's older, duller brother.
Yeah.
Rich, did you enjoy this more than us?
I don't think so. So it's not. I was hoping for a sort of a really cool thriller, and it's very overly serious sort of art house stuff with a bit of weird sexual stuff
it gives
thrown in
house
to make you feel awkward. Sorry,
it gives art house a bad name.
Yeah, but it does that thing like big title cards and stuff.
Mm.
Introducing the cat. Well, you get the character introduction title cards, which I know is a personal hate of
It
yours.
is.
And I would say it does feel like a twisted kind of Mad Men, or sort of via Paul Schrader and Ken Russell.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I mean, the theme's quite interesting, and say you've got the sort of drug stuff. So we get like lots of sort of quite lengthy clips from the period of like whether that's news
Sort of
reports or sort of promotional films
adverts and promo films and stuff. Yeah.
Stuff like that sort of peppered into it. Really sort of breaking it up into kind of chapters, really. But yeah, it does kind of it goes a bit sort of, I think, of like Paul Schrader, like especially sort of in that last part. It sort of goes a bit crazy. It's I didn't like I mean, I know they were he was the director trying to make some sort of point with the sexual scenes and stuff. I didn't like that stuff. That was a bit icky. And sort of a bit I know they're trying, I don't know, mainly to do with like the CIA characters like the Jason Patrick and stuff, who's, I mean, Jason Patrick seems to be aging quite well. I don't know. I haven't seen him for a while, but he looks basically the same as the last time I saw him in something, which was probably like 10 years ago or something. I'm sure he's busy. I think he's been doing TV and different movies and stuff. I think he's done quite a few things, but it was sort of 80s, wasn't he? He was in the Lost Boys, wasn't he?
I think yes, he was. Yeah, he was
the
older brother.
Yeah, he was the older brother-in-law. Yeah, so he looks well. And Anson Mount, yeah, I do like the Virtuoso was the film that
was it.
Steve was referring to, which I did like him in, and I did quite like overall. That was quite an interesting one with Anthony Hopkins. It's just a film that sort of meanders, doesn't it? And then it kind of struggles to sort of pull a narrative together. It's kind of one of these films where it's just kind of a guy doing experiments and stuff, and then there's sort of, it reminded me of I'll tell you what, like a cleverer, better version of this idea was Ultrasound.
Yes.
Which was also sort of messing with people's heads. Yeah, it was one of the favourites. Yeah, it was another film about sort of a bit art housey, but it was all about messing with people's heads and what's real and what isn't and all that sort of stuff. But it was really.
But it gave us a decent protagonist.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing was really well done. Whereas this one, you've got this kind of Anson Mount's character, who's this very sort of dull opposite of a Don Draper, like really kind of introverted character, and not really, you don't really get much from him, and all the interactions are very guarded, and none of the characters really connect because they're all either sort of mistrustful of each other or using each other or whatever it is. Even when he's with his wife, there's no closeness there. If you see what I'm saying. He's very much focused on his work, and so he's quite detached, and I don't know. I'm sort of grasping at straws for trying to find things that I think are worthy or interesting about it. But apart from the fact that it was it's shot well and it's got a couple of decent actors in it, that's about it. I'll be honest. I'm surprised actually that, because this is one that's actually coming out on DVD. It's been on Plex, I think, for a little while, but it's been picked up for DVD, and I think that's an unusual choice compared to quite a few of the other films that we cover, which don't get physical releases. Pretty much, the general rule these days is digital releases, and it always surprises me sometimes with some of the films that actually make it onto disc. I think the cover is quite interesting. The title and the cover. The original film, the film was originally called Midnight Climax, which I believe is the name of the
code name for the operation, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they've gone for the sort of more sort of catchy MK Ultra, which I don't blame them for. And the cover looks quite interesting. So I think people are going to take notice of it and probably pick it up, but it's not the cool thriller that I think the the artwork sells you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I think it's yeah. I'm only gonna, I don't know. I was gonna say 6, but I'm sort of wavering on that even. So I'm gonna, if I can interject with a score at this point,
Yeah, go on.
I'm gonna say probably 5. Even 5 sort of seems too generous. I don't know. I'm gonna stick with a 6. I'm a bit loath to do it, but I think yeah, I can't. It's not quite bland enough to be a 5, I don't think. And it was watchable, but yeah. So I'm going to go.
Would
6.
you watch it again though?
No, I think it needs to be a 7 or 8 to be a film to watch again. I think if I don't ever want to see this again, but I mean, I don't mind the fact that I've seen it, but it was a bit of a chore.
Yeah, indeed. Steve, how about yourself?
5.
I really did not get on with this. So I'm giving this a 4, which I'm pretty sure is the lowest score I've given any film this year so far. If anyone out there is interested or intrigued by the real story behind MK Ultra and CIA stuff, I do recommend last podcast on the left. They did I think 2 or 3 parter on it. That is really informative, as is all their podcasts, to be honest. I do recommend their stuff. I can say that because they don't do film reviews. So I feel not exactly a rival or anything, but people I do enjoy listening to. So there you have it. That is a 4, a 5, and a 6 for MK Ultra. Go check it out if you dare. Our next review is Old Man. When a lost hiker stumbles upon an erratic old man living in the woods, he could never have imagined the nightmare that awaits. This is very much a two-hander, Rich. Do that again.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing.
This is very much a two-hander, Rich. I did at times wonder if this was like a stage play that had been adapted. It could lend itself to that for sure. This is very much a showcase for Stephen Lang overall, playing this sort of cantankerous old guy who doesn't want to be disturbed. It takes great affront when this guy sort of knocks on his cabin. It's an interesting setup. It takes a while to sort of get into its groove, and probably it's only in the last third, I think, that the penny starts dropping as to what may be really going on. But in the meantime, we get a few sort of like little stories and vignettes, sort of peppering things along. I must admit, I did quite like it. One of the things I didn't like was the complete about turn of like Stephen Lang's character when things finally start falling into place, and he becomes this. He's almost like a cowardly lion kind of thing from Wizard of Oz. It's such an about turn, and it's sort of like you kind of feel robbed a bit that the other version of him's gone, and you ended up with this sort of weak, pathetic person. But I'm interested to hear what you made of this.
Well, I wasn't sure what it was going to be when it came, because obviously Stephen Lang's done these Don't Breathe movies, which I haven't seen yet, but are also about sort of an angry old man kind of thing, which I do want to see those. Yeah, and I wasn't sure if this is
not exactly better, completely different to what this is. Yeah.
Well, say this, and this gets started, and as soon as like the credits are rolling and stuff, you get the feeling that there's a certain vibe to this, and when the film kicks it, when the film starts proper, you you're in kind of art house film territory again. There's it's a very slow, sort of disorientating kind of. It's all him coming to and looking for his dog and stuff, and it's very slow, and it soon becomes apparent that you're basically not leaving the cabin, and the film is, like you say, it is very play-like.
It feels very off-Broadway, you know what I mean? It's like it feels like a two-man off-Broadway show.
Yeah, well, the films made out, like, for example, Sleuth in 2007, which was, I think, was a second version of that, but with Jude Law and Michael Caine, the Harold Pinter play, very much came to mind.
I'd like to see that version. I've seen the original version with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine.
I think Caine played the opposite character.
Yeah, he played the opposite character, and then Jude Law plays the thief. So
that kind of came to mind, and also we actually, I can't remember if it was called the Oak Room or something like that.
Yes, the one set in the bar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that came to mind as well, which I did enjoy. I think, you know, what's really interesting is this. I'm pretty much sure that you don't see any like establishing shots or exteriors or anything.
No, it's just the guy turning up. Yeah,
it's all in the cabin, for the most part, and the set design and everything obviously is great. It's directed by Lucky McKee,
yes,
who's done absolutely tons of stuff, like like May, for example, was the one I remember back in the.
The Woman is the one I revere him for.
I haven't seen that one yet. And then The Woman had a sequel, didn't it? That was directed by the lead actress.
Yeah, Pollyanna McIntosh. What was it called? I can't remember. Darling. I said Darling. They also did one called Cheerleaders Must Die. All Cheerleaders Must Die, which I quite enjoyed as well.
Yeah, and I hear Red with Brian Cox is good as well. Anyway, he's done loads of stuff. He's been around since the early 2000s, so like 20 years. And I was expecting, because I was quite surprised about the film, you know, considering you know, his previous work. It was not.
This is very different. Yeah, this is very different.
It's quite different. So, and he's definitely there are horror. I mean, he's known for horror, and there are horror elements in this, but it is very much kind of a not one-man show, because it's both of them, but it's like it is like you say, two-hander kind of thing. And it's very much Stephen Lang's show. I didn't get much out of it. I got to be honest. You know, it was there. I watched it. I was kind of, once I realized that this was what it was, after about 10 minutes or something, you pretty much get the score of what you're in for, and it was fine. There was some interesting sort of, as you know, needs to be the case with this sort of thing. You know, it goes down some avenues, and you know, tables are turned a little bit, and you know, who is there to trust, and you know what you know.
Yeah, it boils down to what the motives are for the characters, and you're kind of sort of searching for clues in the dialogue and things, and sort of trying to guess which, you know, are there any signposts here to sort of show me which way it's going to head into. And I think it does sort of manage to sort of play its cards quite close to its chest. You know, for the most part, and then it sort of starts to, you know, it gets to the point where it can't hold back anymore, and it starts drip feeding you a bit more as to what's actually going on, you know, which I really enjoy.
I think I would have preferred it as like a 20-minute short film, though. I've got to be honest.
It could easily, it feels like it's a short story that's been expanded, you know. It would be great on the stage. It would be a very good, you know, sort of off-Broadway, sort of like, you know, short play kind of thing. I think that would work. Couple of things I did like, when we get the character of Rascal, and his sort of voice modulation. I thought that was a nice touch. Sort of make him sound sort of more sinister and powerful, sort of thing. But it's pretty throwaway. It's not really up to the standard of his previous works, Lucky McKee. I think part of that is the fact that he didn't write it as well. You know, he only directed it. I think direction's fine. It looks great, but it is very limited in scope. And once you know what's happened, you know, it doesn't really sort of leave you anything. You know, repeat value is pretty minimal, I think.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a film that was sort of made out of or around sort of like COVID times, you know, so, you know, when a lot of filmmakers were sort of keeping very small sets and working with very small teams and crews and stuff, and trying to sort of get around the problems that were happening. I don't know when this was produced, by the way, so it could have been after. I don't know. It might just, but that just sort of made me wonder, you know, could that be why the scope has been sort of so limited in this particular story and stuff? I don't know, but yeah, I would struggle to recommend this one. I've got to be honest.
I totally agree. On that note, how are you going to score it?
Well, I'm going to. In this case, I am going to sit on the fence with a 5. I think there's a you know, a solid look to the film, solid performance from Stephen Lang. Wasn't so struck on the other guy, but in a way that was kind of the point, because it was all about Stephen Lang's character sort of dominating. But in terms of the story and the narrative, you know, it wasn't enough there for me. I need a bit more variety. So yeah, I would say about a 5 for me.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you. So that'd be 2 5s for Old Man. Go check it out. Our short shot this week is Oath of Honor. 2 brothers working undercover find themselves at loggerheads after they're involved in a drug bust that goes wrong. This is an interesting one. It's 31 minutes long. We have these 2 brothers. We don't know the brothers to begin with, and they're sort of situated within 2 different gangs who meet for this drug deal. One of them calls their boss secretly to, you know, get back up in, but then we find out that they've been sent to the wrong location. One of the brothers gets shot, the money gets stolen, and everyone dies. And then we sort of jump forward to the next day, sort of thing. I don't know. I don't think this needs to be 31 minutes long.
Well, I think the film itself is about 25 minutes, and then there's like a making of thing after.
That's right. So even so, it still felt quite padded. And there were some very bizarre sort of moments, and very sort of coincidental moments to do with their grandfather. You know, all this just happened to happen on the anniversary of his death, and all this sort of stuff going on, which seems to sort of play a part in certain decisions. And then it just sort of like ends really enigmatically. It's like, okay, very strange. Steve, how did you get on with Oath of Honor?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't too inspiring, to be fair. One thing that did annoy me was it was obviously like CGI squibs on every single gunshot that was going on, you know, in the walls and in bits of barrels and stuff, and it was all you could tell it was all CGI squibs, which it a bit of a bugbear, to be fair. And it is just a bit flat, really. Even in the middle, you know, they turn up at the grandma's and, you know, they've got the shrine to the grandfather and stuff like that. And then they have a bit of a kick-off in I don't know, it's like a warehouse attached to the grandma's or something. It's just a bit weird. And then they have a fag and that's about it. I don't know, it just didn't, it wasn't great. It annoyed me quite a bit, to be fair, this one. Photography was all right, but it's a bit like Gonkata, really, at the beginning. Yeah.
Rich, you curated this one. How did you get on with it?
I thought it was pretty decent. You know, I think it's always really exciting when we get like a short martial arts film that's or a short martial arts action sort of driven film that's you know, of a sort of a medium length, as opposed to sort of like just a quick fight scene, you know, something that sort of develops a bit more of a story. I mean, we had Dragon Cop a little while ago, which was very much Hong Kong flavored
I like that
stuff.
one.
This is from Vietnam, with a project for Peter Pham, who was a name I sort of see around a lot, but I haven't actually seen any of his work until now. A lot of it's turning up on the Hi-YAH channel in the States, and those are certain things like I think it was another short film called Mayhem 24/7, and a new film Foggy Mountain, which is being released over there, but no sign of those over here. I think there's clips and stuff, but that's all you can get at the moment, as far as I'm aware.
Is that a short, Foggy Mountain, or was that full?
No, Foggy Mountain's a feature. But say I think Mayhem.
I think it was released as something else over here. If it's what I'm thinking of.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I have to look into that. What I thought was quite interesting is there's not a lot of dialogue in it. It's very it's very action heavy, which I liked. Some big stunts and stuff in there. It's nothing we haven't seen before. The whole brothers in conflict thing has been the sort of motivation for many films, and I thought it was okay. I didn't mind all the stuff with the ground. Heavy-handed though it might have been, I didn't mind that, but it was more to do with the sort of action quotient of the film that I was particularly impressed by. Peter Pham's actually Vietnamese American. I think he mainly grew up in the United States, but sort of went back to Vietnam and made a whole bunch of stuff over there, and is sort of doing quite well as both trying to do projects where he's in front of the camera, but also choreographing and coordinating his and other projects and stuff. So he's an interesting guy to watch, I think. And yeah, I think if I compared it to something like we watched, there was the Vietnamese short. I can't remember, it was by the Action C group, I think, Special Force or something like that. It was called. I liked that a lot more. That was
that's some good comedy.
That had a lot of comedy. Some of it, doesn't work very, doesn't translate particularly well. A bit too broad and stuff. But I thought that was a much more engaging, more interesting, more lively film. Unfortunately, a lot of Action C stuff doesn't come with subtitles, so I don't generally tend to watch those. But that one, I think there's some really interesting stuff coming out of Vietnam. But as well as features like The Rebel and everything, which sort of around the sort of mid 2000s. But this is kind of an interesting footnote in all that sort of stuff. No, it's not amazing, but I think it's definitely worth a look.
One good, one bad thing from me. Steve, you mentioned the blood squibs being a bit of a bug.
I hate CGI blood squibs as well.
Yeah. I sometimes I don't notice if they're done well. I can give them a pass. What does annoy me, and I have said this before, is the sound effects. Every gun in this film sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That annoys me more than anything else. That sort of takes me out. There's not enough oomph given to any of the sort of gun sounds. That's the bad. The good was during that fight in the end, and some of the sort of directorial choices they made, I really did like. There's a bit where both characters, their face is looming right in the character and taking up the whole frame, as if you're the guy opposite him, about to take a punch. And I thought that worked really, really well. I thought, you really had got this sort of in your face sort of moment out of that, and they do it for both characters, which I thought was really good. It's I don't know, it just comes to an end. It's like, there's no real sort of like conclusion as such, but maybe that that's probably, if they were to sort of try and tie up the loose ends, it's going to add another sort of 10-15 minutes to the film. So probably just,
and a lot of these shorts, I don't know if that was the case here, but quite a lot of shorts are end up unresolved because they're usually like trying to
concept
pictures like a web series or something, or a proof of concept and stuff. I don't know what the end game was with this particular one, whether there was anything like that in mind. The film it's a very weird setup when it starts, because it kind of starts with a trailer, and then the title comes up, and then the film kicks in. And I was trying to think, oh, could you just cut that beginning part off and just, but you kind of need to, because that's where the title comes in. The title doesn't appear anywhere else. You kind of have to watch the first bit to get the title to sort of kick in the film.
It reminded me of an old, well, not an old, but a Jean-Claude Van Damme film, one of his worst, called Kill 'Em All.
Oh god, yeah.
Which used for the opening sequence, it used clips from its own film.
Well, like really Mission Impossible and stuff.
But done really, really slowly.
Oh god, Kill 'Em All is just like, oh, it's awful, but I'm fascinated by it at the same time. It's like how is it like, I don't know. I'm gonna that's a topic for another day, that film.
Indeed, absolutely. Okay, I think we've got to the end of this. So we don't score the shorts, but we do recommend you check them out. This is definitely worth checking out. It's half an hour long. Have a look at it. We'll put the link in the footnotes below. Go check it out. Our DTV throwback this week is Tremors 2 Aftershocks. Earl Bassett, now a washed-up ex-celebrity, is hired by a Mexican oil company to eradicate a graboid epidemic that's killing more people each day. However, the humans aren't the only ones with a new battle plan. I haven't seen this since probably when it came out on release, donkeys and donkeys ago. And I watched it this afternoon with my son, Josh. He's 15. No, he's 16. What I'm on about. And even my wife sat down and watched it as well. We all had an absolute blast with this. I've seen most of the sequels. I don't think I've seen the third one. I've seen some of the later ones, and they're all pretty rollicking, good fun. I thought they did really well to get Fred Ward back for this one, for sure. Kevin Bacon, not so much, nowhere near it. But I think they did a very good job with this. I really liked it. I liked the fact that, you get to a point, you're watching them just blowing up the graboids, and you're sort of thinking, well, is this it? We're just going to be watching them blowing up graboids for the rest of the film. Something has to give, something has to change. And boy, does it change. They come up with this sort of new thing, and suddenly everything changes in the film. And I thought that worked really, really well. Steve, had you seen this one before?
No, I've seen the original a few times. Love the original. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I started off watching it and I'm thinking, you've got the montage of them killing the graboids. I'm like, is this it? It just seemed exactly the same as the first one, condensed into half an hour. And then they change it up, and it starts to become fun again, and gets a hell of a lot better in the second half. And I'll be honest, the disappointing thing with it is there isn't actually that much death.
Yeah.
It sounds daft, but I think there's the guy in the opening credits, and then the guy who gets dragged off near the window, and I think that's it. Yeah. To be fair.
Yeah. The later sequels make up for it.
Yeah, possibly, but
yeah,
it just needed a bit more, not gore, but more
danger. Yeah, more peril. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no suspense there. They're all going to survive, really, especially Earl, because he's in like every sequel. But
he isn't. I mean, I think, I'm not sure if he's in the next one, but it's
I think you mean Burt Gummer.
Yeah, Burt.
Yeah,
Burt's the one who sort of carries the series from then on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's cheap fun. It is what it is. There's no airs and graces with it. It's just flat out monster movie.
Yeah, this is like a perfect example of what Universal does well, I think, in turning a fairly successful film into a very successful sort of DTV series.
Yeah.
So this we've had the Sniper series, which I'll keep singing the praises of. Things like Death Race, Scorpion King. They've all sort of been pretty decently produced sequels to something which did okay at the box office, but has actually done been pretty solid on DTV. And this was a good start, I think. Rich, I'm sure you must have seen this back in the day.
Yeah, this was kind of one of the ones that kind of hooked me in, I guess. Really, not to the series, which I don't dislike, but I'm actually not up on all the sequels. I've probably only seen a couple of them, to be honest. But I did quite like the original. But this came along, and it was like 95, 96, and it was where, like you say, the DTV sequels thing was kind of kicking in. Darkman had been a bit before this, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And the quality, what we had here was a good quality one, and I think some DTV sequels that have come after have been quite ropey, but this one had enough. Although the budget limitations are obvious, maybe not something I thought about at the time, but the film itself has enough going on, and it's well written enough, well made enough, that it sort of stands out, and I do think it stands the test of time. We found it on Netflix now. It looks very grainy on Netflix. I don't know if that's just with the age of the film or something, or they,
I thought it looked really, really good, actually. I was watching it thinking this is the best of, probably the best it's ever been in.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it's different. Could be different TV, could be different Netflix agreement or something. I don't know, but I was watching it on quite a big TV, and it was very grainy when I was watching it. More the grainiest thing I've watched lately, anyway. There's CGI in it. This was the time when sort of transitioning into CGI, and there's actually a reasonable amount of CGI in it. And yes, it hasn't aged well, but I've seen worse. In comparatively, I think it's aged quite well. Obviously, the practical effects are the ones that look best, but they're quite inanimate. The practical stuff, for the most part, it's more of it pops up and maybe something wiggles, and that's about it.
Excuse me. If you think of Space Wars that we reviewed a few weeks back, that has hardly any budget at all, but it has some pretty decent. In comparison, sort of CGI creature effects, I thought. If can you imagine sort of like if Phil Tippett's animation studio had access to today's technology for the same money, how much better they would have looked at the time.
Well, I'd be interested because I haven't seen the more recent stuff. I mean, there's been 7 Tremors films as well as a TV series. But for example, the last film was in 2020. I'd be really interested to see what the effects and stuff look like in, like what is basically 25 years after this in comparison. But yeah, here we've got the main asset of the film is Fred Ward. He's kind of the anchor for it, and it's a shame that he didn't come back for any of the others, but it's kind of good that in a way it's also kind of perfect that he just did this one. He gets to sort of step into the limelight, because the first one was much more of an ensemble, and this this is an ensemble, but he's very much at sort of leading it, and he's perfect as the character. I can see I could see like a new version with maybe like Frank Grillo playing the character or something. He's just kind of got that thing about him. The rest of the cast are pretty good. Obviously, Michael Gross from Family Ties as Burt Gummer. They do some. The film is directed by the writer who was also one of the writers of the original film, which I think he was making his debut, but he did a good, solid, directorial debut here. Also responsible for writing other classics like Short Circuit and Batteries Not Included, but has very much sort of been really sort of I don't know if he retired or what, but he hasn't done he sort of kept a fairly low profile apart from like things like Wild Wild West, but since this. But I thought he did a good job directing the film. There's some nice big explosions and stuff every at certain intervals. But they've shot it. They move it to Mexico, like you said, but you can see from that opening scene how little money they've got to work with. It's basically a big sort of. It reminds me of Legendary, the
Scott Adkins
movie, where they're sort of in an isolated and they've got like this refinery or whatever, but there's barely anything there. It's like a small build, like a couple of tubes sort of going across, and that's pretty much it. But the big opening sequence here is a guy running across some oil drums, and there's not really much more than that. And then some say the locations are quite sparse and that, but it's the characterization and the script and stuff that really sort of keeps you engaged, and some of those sort of ideas and the visual effects of presentation of those that sort of really keep you engaged and gripped, and I think make this, say, one of the best sort of, not just one of the best DTV sequels, but one of the better sequels of that sort of the 90s, I would say.
It does a good job of sort of channeling Jaws as well. There is a sort of thing, at least for that first half of the film, of like keeping the graboids off screen, but letting you know they're there. I mean, one of the bits my son really enjoyed was when they get, when one of them picks up the chain that's tied to the back of the truck and starts dragging it across the countryside. That was really, really cool. And that, again, it had a sort of big sort of Jaws influence.
Well, there's also the thing with the radio.
Yeah. That was from the Jurassic Park 3, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I'm sure I've seen that in something else. And was it Jurassic Park 3?
It was Jurassic Park 3 when he swallows the satellite phone. Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, it gets away with a lot just through sound effects as well. Like I say about the thing. But the bit where they're sort of camped out at night, you can hear one of them sort of calling and that sort of stuff. I thought, it works really, really well. With, as you say, with a limited budget, it knows how to work around it. Which I thought did pretty good until the turkey graboids turn up. Okay. Any more thoughts on this one?
No, I was just saying it was really good to watch it again. I haven't seen it for a long time. I do really want to check out some of the rest of the series, but I thought it really I do feel this is one of those sequels that really does stand the test of time.
Yeah, I've seen the last two, the Shrieker Island and the Cold Day in Hell. And I did enjoy them both. So I can't remember how. I mean, obviously they're DTV sequels, but I wasn't put out by any shoddy effects or anything like that. So.
Wasn't it John Heder was in Shrieker Island? He was like the new comedy sidekick character.
I think so.
Yeah, and prior to that it was Jamie Kennedy. It's like in this one they haven't got Kevin Bacon, so they sort of introduce this taxi driver guy who turns up at the beginning and then goes, "Oh, I'm going to be your sidekick." It's a bit weird, but he ends up being not too bad in sort of. In the film, they sort of graft him in because they couldn't get Kevin Bacon and stuff. I think the film's got quite I watched I don't know if it was because of combining, when it came on Netflix and stuff, people thinking about it more, but I think there was like a Joe Blow video or something that I saw that was, recently that was sort of going into the background of, they were aiming for a bigger, like a lot of these DTV sequels, they were sort of aiming for a proper sequel, and it did, big theatrical version, and it didn't quite pan out, and they have to cut the budget and all that stuff. So, and I think this is kind of testament to, although a lot of compromises were clearly made, you haven't got a big studio director, so you got a first time or whatever, but you've got somebody who really cares about the story and that, and characters who are really committed to the performances, and say good visual effects people like the Tippett team. And you can make a good solid movie that stands the test of time, and it doesn't have to be a huge blockbuster.
Now S.S. Wilson, he directed Tremors 3 and 4, Back to Perfection, and The Legend Begins, and then the series is taken over by Don Michael Paul, who does the last three. I do have to correct. He didn't do the third one. That was Brent Maddock, but he did do the fourth one. Yeah, you're right. Yes. Yeah, he co-wrote it.
But yeah, the third one was where Michael Gross sort of takes the lead, and he's been living off that series ever since. So, which is good for him, you know. But yeah, it's one of those ones. I bet there'll be a Tremors. You know, the series will keep going. I'm sure the next step is like a big remake or something. But be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully, they won't go the big CGI graboids kind of route. I think you know
some practical work. Needs to be in there for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you can tell we enjoyed this one because we've been talking about it for a while. This is currently on Netflix, but it is due to disappear at the end of June. Yeah, little caption came up as I was watching it today. So you know, if you are interested, grab it while you can. So yeah, that is the end of this week's show. Thanks to you guys for watching these very bizarre films this week.
Oh, it was a mixed bag. I mean, I really found the Australian stuff the most interesting out of what we've seen today.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
definitely. Short was pretty good. And as I said, the links will be there. We'll put links to the trailers for all the films that we've been discussing this evening in the footnotes as well. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter at the DTV Digest. Also the Short Shots, where Rich will put a link to a new short every evening around about 8 o'clock. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time.
Thank you for listening to the DTV Digest. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tune in again next time.